This is another episode of the Tequity Hub on Tequity Tuesday. I'm Amy DeLouise, your host for today, founder of GALSNGEAR. If you're not already a member of GALSNGEAR, you can go to galsngear.tv. I'll put the link in the chat, and we'd love to have you join us for not just our regular meetups on the hub, but also all of our live events, our trainings, our upskilling, and our newest beta testing initiative, which has been really exciting. So we've got a lot going on. Before we get to today's show, which is going to be a little bit about new technologies at IBC and sort of some of the industry trends we're seeing, I wanted to bring up Katie Hinson, who's joined us briefly, and she's going to talk about the post-production survey and why it's so darn important for our industry to advance equity. Go, Katie.
So, Amy. Yeah, nice to see everybody here. It's pretty cool that you're doing all this online. I remember doing this stuff with you, Amy, back in NAB almost 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, about 10 years ago.
Yep, we started in 2016.
IRL. Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that everybody knows about the survey. This is the 9th year that I am doing the survey, the annual US post-production survey. It's something that is really important to keep doing and to make sure that folks get the opportunity to participate in. You take the short and anonymous survey every year in October, and the data that comes out of it is really, really useful. It serves 3 purposes. There's a report that comes out every year, and that actually goes out to the industry quite widely. And it looks at things like trends in gender and racial pay gaps, location pay gaps, a lot of really important things like that. Also, just how much different parts of the industry are getting paid, what the average rates are, and what those trends look like as well. And then things like how are people working? Are they working from home? Are they working, are they working in the office? And what are the trends there? And the really, really big thing that report also does is it shows us where we need to target our efforts to make things more equitable in the industry. So you can really see that some areas are actually doing okay and other areas really aren't. And so we can really focus those things. The other thing that it does is that the raw data itself, it's anonymized, but it's a really cool way for folks to be able to just still have that transparency, share with their peers, what their situation is, so that other people can see and advocate for themselves better. And that's really how this thing started. So the raw data is there. And, when I'm hiring folks, for example, I can see how much should I be paying them? And that's really good for productions and producers who aren't really sure about what they should be budgeting for post-production, for example. They can actually go and they can actually filter really, really down into, we're looking for someone in this location to do this kind of content, this kind of experience level, all of these other factors that you can filter by. And you can really play around and see, yeah, I'm
showing last year's, yeah.
There's a report from last year. The raw data is also made public on the website, so you can filter down and really get see those things. And then people are also every single day somebody accesses that data set, which is really cool. I see it every day of the year. At least one person accesses the data set, because people are using it to be able to advocate for themselves in terms of how much they should get paid for a job. So they can compare themselves against their peers and make sure that they're getting paid the right amount. So there's so many things that this is really useful for. And every year there's a bunch of people who get FOMO and they say, oh my God, I didn't know about it and I wanted to be part of it. So I wanted to kind of spread the word as much as I possibly can that it's going to be open. The survey is going to be open this year from through the month of October. So we've got a week until it's open, and then 4 weeks that it is open and for people to participate.
That's fantastic. And you really just take a look at the last surveys if you can. Because it's just really helpful to see. And of course, we see a lot of pay gaps, which we really don't want to see.
We do, but what's interesting is that the pay gaps, both binary, gender, and racial, have been closing for editors over the last few years. And it's quite interesting. The editors have really made an effort. But other areas have largely gotten worse since the pandemic. And I think what I've seen in trends here from the respondents on this survey is that we saw the impact, which was, commensurate with every other industry, which is that certain people were impacted by job losses more than others. And we saw the same thing being repeated again with the Hollywood strikes. So the same trends in terms of the same sort of demographics of folks being impacted more than others.
Interesting. So what were some of the trends that you're hoping to see change this year, if there is one?
I imagine this year, I've started making predictions because I'm getting quite good at this. So, it's nine years I've been doing this now, and I've been seeing some of this stuff. I think that I'm going to see some of the trends that we've seen in terms of what happened with pandemic recovery, and then there was a little bump with strikes. I think we're going to see some of those trends again repeating. Last year, it was fascinating to see the same trends that we saw with the pandemic shutdown repeat themselves in the strike shutdown, but to a smaller extent, because the strikes didn't impact everybody. The strikes impacted Hollywood and the big centers. So, it was a smaller version of that. But the trends were the same, the patterns were the same. And so I think the patterns of recovery are going to be largely the same as well. But we're also seeing an overall shift. Almost a decade ago when I started doing this, the kind of content people were working on was so different to the kind of content people are working on today. And a lot of folks don't realize that.
Right.
They don't realize that that shift is not necessarily a negative thing. It's just literally a shift in the state of the industry and what opportunities there are.
Right. Like, what would you say the two big buckets are of production now that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago?
Podcasts are much more popular. There's a lot more people working on podcasts and interactive and games. There's also more people working on sort of more corporate, educational, those kinds of more independent content. Whereas 10 years ago, we had web series. And now hardly anybody says I'm working on web series, but there's a lot more of that, what I call independent content. So it might be social, educational, those kinds of things. And there's actually quite a large industry in that.
Sure. That's my industry, is the non-broadcast.
It's much bigger. It's a much bigger segment of the industry than it was a decade ago.
Yeah.
For professionals. Yeah.
Right. Professionals, right.
For professionals. Yeah. I think maybe a decade ago, it was a lot less professionals doing that work. It was a lot less high level, high quality. But now it's really, it's cool in that sense.
Well, I really appreciate you jumping on to talk about this. We're going to release the survey link in our next e-news, and we'll put it out on our social channels to be sure we get as many people in our network to put in their data. And, if you can all spread the word in your own networks, that would be really, really helpful, because Katie needs, the more data, the better.
The more data, the better, and the more it can help people. The other thing just to note is that every year there are bonus questions that tell you a little bit about what's happening this year. So last year we had questions about the impacts of the strikes, for example. Every year there's something that's very specific to what's happening right now that people want to know. And really this data just, it asks questions and it answers questions that people have. And so this year we have some additional bonus questions that are really relevant to the conversations that are happening this year. So that's, that's really, it's going to be really interesting to see how folks are responding.
Right.
So please make sure we need this as diverse a data set as possible. If you're a professional working in any area of the post-production industry, anywhere in the United States, and if you're out of work, that's also fine. If you consider yourself a post-production professional, then make sure that your voice is heard and that you're counted.
And we have a lot of members who are in the post side of things. So
exactly,
in audio and video and all the different channels. So we'll make sure we spread the word. And Katie, I know you had a busy schedule, so I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you.
At some point, we'll have a longer session with you about something else, maybe in person. Hope to see you at one of them.
I'm kind of bummed I don't get to stay for this conversation. It sounds really fascinating. I'd love to hear what everybody's thoughts on IBC are. I know it's been recorded, so hopefully I can watch it later.
Yeah, it won't be as fun, but we'll definitely send you the link. All right, Katie, thanks for joining. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
All right, and now I'd like to actually officially start our official Tequity Tuesday. So welcome to those who just joined. I see folks from AJA and Whitby and Lots of other friends who've joined us. Amanda Castillo, great to see you. Noemi, it's just a really nice group of people. Ellie, great to have all of you, Catherine, Sarah, all of you here. So thank you for joining. One of the things I always like to do at the top is thank our sponsors. We couldn't do any of the programs we do. As much as we do pro bono, we do need a little bit of cash to keep the trains running. So we really appreciate our sponsors. AJA is one of them. Since they're here, we'll thank them publicly. But we've also had a lot of great anchor sponsors like Adobe and Blackmagic and Dell who've been with us for a long time. So we really appreciate those sponsorships, and especially to our friends at Signiant who always sign up and support us. Thank you for your support. Let's just dive right in because we want to get going on our program. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Mosely and who else do I have here? Cindy Zuelsdorf. So come on up, Cindy. Yay.
Hey.
Cindy is a marketing guru. She has worked with some of the top brands in our industry. I'm sure she can tell you a little bit more about what she does. But what I think she does so incredibly well is she automates a lot of marketing functions, which many of us are still tediously doing by typing them in by hand, like following up with people on LinkedIn, et cetera, after IBC. So I hope that as part of what she's going to talk about today, in addition to giving us her lens on the industry, she's going to give us a few strategies that both individuals and companies could use to do a better job to market themselves. So welcome, Cindy.
Hey, Amy.
And Sarah Mosely is jumping in today. We were going to have Carrie Wooten, but she's not available. And Sarah was part of the World Skills Cafe that Carrie did at IBC. And she also joined Gals and Gear on the stage for the talent program discussion. So she actually has a great vantage point. And she's a young person, I'll just say it that way, Sarah. So she's at the earlier part of her career. But she's already had a very rock star career as an editor and technologist, and she also has a degree in computer science. So she has a lot of interesting perspectives. Oh, hi, Amanda. I see Amanda Sapp. Welcome. So she has a lot of interesting perspectives to add from her time at IBC. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
So I want to start with Cindy. And by the way, she's also on the board of Veterans Television, which I think is very cool. So she's also helping veterans into our industry. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what was just kind of a headline takeaway from IBC this year? Was there something just kind of big, writ large, that you took away from being there?
Oh, you and I chatted yesterday about it, so narrowing it down. So one thing that came up for me, and it might be because some of the companies that I get to work with, is the sort of stalled out ATSC 3.0 situation. And maybe you heard a little bit about that, Amy and Sarah. I know we talked a little bit about it yesterday.
For those who are not in the loop, can you just give a kind of really brief definition?
Yes, of course. Advanced Television Systems Committee is ATSC, and there's the 1.0 that just has to do with the broadcast that we see at home, and the 3.0. What's interesting about that, some of the things are accessibility, and it's just more available to people with disabilities to be able to watch television. There's higher frame rates supported and so many things. And so there's a lot of manufacturers in our industry at IBC who've been making equipment, ATSC 3.0 equipment, next gen TV. You might have heard it called that. I don't know if anybody's heard that, next gen TV.
Hashtag next gen TV.
Hashtag next gen TV. And so that's cruising along well. Yet there's not that much content available as I understand it. So there's this funny chicken and egg thing where there's a small number of set-top box and TV manufacturers. It seems like there'd be zillions, but it's relatively small. And they maybe are still doing ATSC 1.0 in the equipment. So when you go to the store and buy a TV, that's what it's going to be. And they don't put ATSC 3.0 in because they're like, well, there's not that much content available yet.
Yeah.
And then it's vice versa. It's like, well, you need to put our equipment in so that we can make the content. So there's a little bit of this going on, and it's stalled out, and maybe there'll be some governmental support or mandates or something like that. I don't know, just guessing, to move it forward.
Right. Well, this
That's one
happens,
thing
you
that
know, at
bubbled up.
this seems to happen, Cindy, at every juncture that we go through with the industry. I mean, even with just, you know, digital bandwidth, where we started out with 1080 and then we went to, you know, 4K, and then it was like, oh, nobody will buy 4K set tops. And then it was like, okay, everybody has 4K set tops, so we don't have enough 4K content. Now we have a lot of 4K content and we're going to 6K, 8K, a million K.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the constant catch up, but that's a very interesting observation.
Yeah.
Sarah, what about you? I know this was your first IBC, so there was probably a lot of overwhelming input, but is there a big takeaway that you had from the event?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, there was a lot of focus on gender diversity, and then also generative AI was a big focus. And specifically, there was a session, it was called CEO and Founders Women-Led Generative AI Startups in the Media and Entertainment space. And it was a really interesting panel.
Yeah, that was
I wish I would have gone to that.
Yeah,
that was, we went to that together. That was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I mean, it was one of the main panels, and it kind of represented what big trends are going on in media. So yeah, and there were a lot of really interesting applications of generative AI, like in animation that they discussed, and they were women-led companies, which I thought was really inspiring. So that was the big highlight for me of the conference.
And what was really interesting to me about that session was most of them were working in an open source type of environment. So a lot of people could access their tech, and, you know, they basically wanted to make it usable on more platforms, as opposed to some of the traditions of our industry where it's been a very kind of closed circle. And so I thought that was an interesting kind of mini trend within the bigger topic of Gen AI that I thought was kind of interesting, that they just were approaching their business model a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So jumping into the gender diversity issue, Cindy, did you see more women on the show floor than usual? Did you feel like there were a few of us there?
Oh my gosh. I was just like taking a snapshot of time there, because I'm thinking of back to some of the earlier IBCs I did where it was tricky to just get help. And so I know this is IBC, but I can remember at NAB when you're setting up and the bathrooms were locked for the women during setup in my hall. Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So did I see more women? Yes, I see more women every year, and I'm stoked, and it's awesome.
Right.
So yes, more women.
Yeah, I think there were more women, but I think this year, to Sarah's point, there was finally a sort of intentional focus on that. And, you know, at GALSNGEAR, we have a kind of mixed feeling about that. We really don't love to be on panels that are just like, hey, let's all complain about diversity. We're much more interested about like tactical action steps, or just talking about the technology that we know how to use and how to, you know, so I think that the presentation that Sarah and I were involved with Armel Kane, who couldn't join us this morning because she's got the flu, from Host Broadcast Services, was a better take on it, because it was more about a solution. Like, how can we solve the talent pipeline, as opposed to like, oh, let's all just complain and, you know, isn't it terrible and whatnot. So I thought that was a better way to approach it. And I'm wondering from you, Sarah, because you participated in Carrie Wooten's event on Thursday, the World Skills Cafe, where they really kind of did I think it was like a half day or almost a full day workshop on sort of what are the talent pools that are missing? How could we find them? What are the solutions? You were one of the facilitators at one of the tables. So like, what did your table come up with? What were some of the big challenges and what were some of the solutions?
Yeah, so it was the World Skills Cafe. I've never participated in anything like that before, but it was super interesting because we each, you know, we were leading a discussion at one table, and my table was diversity. And there were other tables like new technology, retention, And so we had this rotating group of individuals from streamers, broadcasters, tech vendors who were just participating in discussions about these topics, which was in this like rotating format, which was so cool. But I noticed that diversity is, it's valued by people, but the definition is different. So we had someone from the Czech Republic, not to say that, not to make any judgments about that, but this one person didn't really have a holistic understanding, or didn't seem to understand the value of diversity in the same way that me and my facilitator did, I'm from the US and she's from the UK. So there's a big difference in if you're from a different country or a different culture in how you value diversity. So one of the topics we discussed was maybe broadening diversity, the definition of it from just women and minorities to also age, neurodiversity, things like that, so that companies can have a holistic approach when they're measuring data and trying to improve, the environment within their companies. And then also in the onboarding process, that could be a good part of the employees' life at the company to tackle diversity and kind of get them. Yeah. So so onboarding was,
yeah.
Well, and I think
in defense of
go ahead.
In defense of Czech Republic, I realize you're talking about one particular person. We actually get to work with a company that's based there, and just in this case, and everybody's different and every company's different. I'm dealing with women in the company, men in the company, and there's a lot of diversity in that particular instance. And they happen to be in Czech Republic, so I just thought I'd throw that out as a compare and contrast, just as a contrast.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make any judgments,
I know.
But there was one guy, and he happened to be from the Czech Republic.
But I think to your point, and one of the things we talked about on our panel was also global diversity. So many companies now have global people, especially because, post-COVID, people are working from home. They're working from a lot of different countries. I mean, I know in my company, we have several people from Ukraine. We have people in Israel. We have people in, other countries who are working with us on a regular basis. And they come at things, with a slightly different vantage point. So global diversity. Also, I think accessibility is really important. And I think that's something Katie and I had talked about when I was writing my book on sound, was that I think now there's a lot more localization and captioning in many different languages, and also audio description. And all of that is somewhat enabled by our digital technologies. But I still think I'm always shocked at how many productions my company works on where I have to remind people that we should be releasing, a version with audio description, a version with captions in different languages, et cetera. So I think access is still a diversity issue that we haven't really fully tackled as an industry, just as a personal observation.
Yeah, and we also talked about hidden disabilities and how that's not often addressed on the corporate level when it comes to diversity. So that was a big topic. Yeah.
So
I love that you just said that different people and companies and geographic areas have different ideas of what diversity and inclusion means. That's just a cool aha for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that from an industry standpoint, it's something that we're only just starting to tackle. So I did appreciate that IBC set up a whole stage for this. I mean, it was under the banner of talent program, and lots of different organizations participated, including SIMPTE and RISE and Women in Streaming Media and GALSNGEAR. But I think it's a bigger industry conversation, and I'm hoping that it's not just in the back of Hall 8 on the last day, but is actually front and center in Hall 1 at some point. That's always my dream. Carla gave the big thumbs up to that. She knows She knows from working with us that like, that was one of my things with NAB. I was like, do not put us in the back of like North Hall somewhere, like put us on center stage. So switching gears to marketing, because I think as you walk through the show floor, of course, you're seeing how companies are marketing themselves. And Cindy, you had a knee scooter because you busted your knee. So I watched you zooming around on the show floor, which I totally sympathize with because 2 years ago I broke my ankle while I was at IBC. So on the knee scooter, as you scooted around, were there some sort of things that you noticed? How are companies
Yeah.
marketing themselves? And is there a
Yes. Yes. And I'm just gonna say one quick takeaway and jump into marketing. On the last day, as I was scooting out, I noticed some people coming in that had recycling and donation boxes. And as a person who's exhibited at the show over and over and sadly thrown things away, I was so stoked to see this sort of green attention. And along with that, donations, there was, I know some of my colleagues had a carriage that they rented to get a train from London over to Amsterdam. And there was this whole like green sustainability that I know has been building up over the years. But if you just go back 10 years, it just wasn't there. And so I just really had to share that because I cheered out loud, and I'm sure somebody thought I was a crazy person because I'm standing by myself on the scooter and I see this donation box come out and I'm like, yay! Oh my gosh, that's great. I'd never seen it before. So I had to share that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was Barbara Lang's doing as part
I
of
don't
her
know.
MTSS Sustainability Summit. I didn't get a chance to go to that, and I was hoping to ask Carmel about it. Karen,
So I
did you go
derailed
to
your
that?
question.
Did you go to that, Karen, by any chance?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I know I've talked to NAB before about what they can do, especially
Right.
like NAB New York, 'cause people are just giving stuff away.
Right.
And
Which
they
is
said they,
great.
yeah, but they said they had a
Better.
program. I thought it would be better if they got local charities involved
So
to
better.
Yes,
pick it
that's a
up.
great idea. So
So
put a
better.
pin in
I
that.
just couldn't.
Maybe Gals and Gear can be involved in that. And I know Amanda Sapp, who's part of our leadership circle, and she's on here. She runs a nonprofit radio station out of Houston that does a ton of stuff with local community and local charities. So I bet she would tell us exactly how to make that happen. So we'll loop you in on that. So that's very interesting, having that lens. And I think, you know, that's also kind of part of the sustainability picture, right? Because to me, diversity and green are actually two sides of the same coin. We can't really sustain ourselves as an industry if we only hire half the people who are eligible for jobs, or don't retain more than half the people who are eligible to move up the career ladder. But also the flip side is, you know, how are we handling our environment as we produce all this stuff, both physical stuff, and I will say, I'll circulate post chat because I don't have it up on my screen, but the Washington Post did an incredible story today on the impact of generative AI, and like how many, like the equivalent of how much water and electricity it takes to just do one ChatGPT search. And like if you just did one ChatGPT search every week for a year, it's pretty mind-blowing. And we know from those of us who work on post-production, and a lot of our tools are AI, generative AI dependent, like how much, and people on distribution side, like we're using a lot of power to do this, and we're not just using ChatGPT. So that's definitely an issue that the industry is just starting to tackle. What about you, Sarah? Were there any other things on the floor, like when you were walking through, were there any things that jumped out at you about how companies are marketing themselves that drew you to their booth?
Yeah, well, the Amazon Web Service booth did a great job of marketing themselves.
And what stood out to you?
Yeah, so they had they were marketing this interactive like part of their booth where you could bring up an idea and they could, you know, tell you what tech could be used to make your workflow more efficient, for example. And so it seemed like they were really hands-on and really wanting to, you know, talk to the customer and be on the same level. And
Mhm.
kind of opened the dialogue, which I thought was pretty innovative.
Right. Well, and it's a little bit of flipping the narrative, if you will. Like in the old days, the booth was like, you know, a billboard, right? You know, maybe you had a video or, you know, some flashy lights or stuff, but it was sort of like whatever that was baked into the build, and it wasn't going to change based on who came up to the booth. And what you're saying is they now have content that changes based on who's coming up to the booth. So that's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah.
What about you, Cindy? What are some marketing strategies that you thought really stood out? And I know you're involved in some of them too, and that's okay to shout out.
Okay. Well, at the top of the show, you asked, kind of commented about marketing automation and doing tedious tasks. And I want to say, since you were talking two sides of the coin a moment ago, that marketing automation, I love, love, love it because we use automation in play out and all types of workflow things. The flip side of that coin is we want to be personal and have people know, like, and trust us. So there is a way to combine those two things, just like there is in other parts of our video, audio, content workflow where we're using automation and it's still personal. And like you were just saying, Sarah, that the content you saw was directed at you and your needs. And so any of that marketing automation can be used to start a conversation, and then you can pick up as a human and take it over. And so things that are working, one of the folks that we worked with at the show had a information, and you could text a keyword in. They could have used IBC or a different keyword and then text that to a particular number, and then get a block diagram on like how this particular system was set up. And they actually had 4 different, you know, text in depending on what you want. And yes, it's automated when you get that. So it'll be like, hey, Amy, here's that diagram you requested. Hey, Sarah, here's the info on this. And then, though, a salesperson or someone on the team gets notified and can pick up that conversation. If you wait to get home to do some of those things, it gets lost between the cracks. So having a system in place to do that, just like we do with all of our audio and video workflow processes, is good. And having something to give that's useful. So we're not just pitching, but we're giving something useful is really
Right.
good.
Well, and we're going to give something useful because Cindy is the author of 7 Marketing Basics, How to Do Less and Sell More. And so she's got, there's the book. I just put up the Amazon up there. So she's going to show you, literally show you how her automated marketing works if you text the word 7. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I put it in the chat. If you text the word 7 to this phone number, she'll send you a chapter of the book.
True. I wrote the book because people would call up and say, what's working? What should I do? There's so many things I don't know what to do. And I'm like, here's the 7 things we do the most with people. I'll just show you how we do it. It literally has our templates in it for different things that we do with folks. So you can take them and use them.
And full disclosure, she's going to help me with some of our challenges at GALSNGEAR
100%.
with our email newsletters bouncing around and whatnot. So it's always good to have an outside view of how you're doing your marketing strategies. One thing I'm curious about, and I don't know if this came up as you were scooting about the show floor or as you were walking about the show floor, Sarah, but was anybody marketing themselves as a company that had a diverse employee base? I mean, I know this is not really an employee-facing conference, it's a customer-facing conference, but I'm just curious if that came up in any conversations, because I know it came up with me in a couple of conversations where people were like, oh yeah, we actually have 50% of our engineers are women, which I thought was interesting. Did I come up with it?
I did talk with someone, and this is so silly, Sarah, just, I hope you don't mind. This was the company based in the Czech Republic, and they were telling me that, just ironically, they were telling me, hey, we have a big focus on making sure that the staff know that we're very international, and that the customers know that there's someone probably right there where they are, someone like them, and really talking a lot about geography, but also other diversity things. I was talking with someone who was doing hiring, and she was telling me all this stuff about how they were wanting to get that message out, and it was really interesting. So that was
That's
one
interesting. And
company
I
that-
think,
Mhm.
and I'm going to just hold that up in contrast to a conversation I had last year with a never to be disclosed head of a company who, you know, once he heard that I was with GALSNGEAR, he said, "Oh, we have a lot of trouble hiring lady engineers." And I was like, you know, I'm guessing they might not want to work for you if you call them lady engineers. Just as a possibility. So you know, maybe we're making some progress. So I'm good with that. I'm really good with that. I'm just curious. I'd like to throw it open to the floor because I know Carla, you were there. Noemi, you were at a booth, so you know you could see that from the vantage point of customers coming. Joe, anybody who was there, would anybody like to jump in and just say anything that struck you this year at IBC, either as just a standout great thing or something you wish could be improved or what have you? Anybody have something?
I can go.
Carla,
I have notes.
you have
No,
notes.
I was no, I was just going through the topics and trying to, you know, come up with my vintage points. But I think I had a very different IBC experience. I'm usually at booths or giving interviews or doing product demos, and we were not going to go to IBC this year because we are restructuring a few things. And it's not a fully like video, you know, we need the end editor, not the higher level. So for us, sales wise, it's better to go to shows where we talk to the actual video editors. But we wanted to have a different experience. So I actually had time to go around the show floor a little bit more. I was more focused on partners and, you know, what the video editing trends are, so we can think about new products and how to incorporate AI. So I think that already includes two topics you guys talked about already. But I think for me, I was really interested. To me, it was really good to see the AI conversation shift. I think we had a huge like wave of like AI is doing everything, AI is doing that. In a few years later, what couple of years later, we are actually filtering a little bit more on the video editing side. It's like, yeah, it can do a lot of things, but how can we actually use it on professional video editing?
Right.
It's very different than all the things that it can do. And we have been struggling and discussing that for more than a year now at Digital Anarchy, because yeah, we can, there's a lot of AI, but how can we make a feature for our products or a product that it's AI based, but it will actually work on professional video editing? It's a completely different conversation. And I think people started to talk more about that instead of all the AI taking all the jobs and the AI doing everything. So I was really happy to hear that.
And just to share with everyone, Carla works for Digital Anarchy, also one of our valued and treasured longtime partners and sponsors. And they make plugins for editing systems, all kinds of NLEs. So it's platform agnostic, like Beauty Box, Flickr free. What am I forgetting, Carla?
There's so many. Samurai. We have a transcription tool. It's a little different from the Adobe system.
Right. So they have a lot of great
Shopee.
tools.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I think it's interesting what you're saying, because definitely the AI is taking your job, seems to have transformed into how can you learn to use AI for your job so that you can advance what you're doing and make what you're doing, whatever part of the workflow you're in, whether it's on the creative side, like, you know, for me, it's about creative storyboarding and can I use some of these tools for storyboarding in the production process, visualization, in the post process, obviously just speeding up a lot of things, and also metadata, management of metadata.
You know, we talked yesterday, Amy, I'm vamping since you're coughing. We talked yesterday briefly about, hey, so, you know, there's this, oh my gosh, AI, it's new. Okay, yeah, a lot of it is new. And we were talking about Watson with IBM doing sports highlights reels more than 10 years ago. So it's it's been around, and yes, it's evolving, not saying it's not, but it's not like it just turned on last year. And so to your point, Carla, about how to apply it, I mean, I agree with that so much, because there's so many things we can do, but they need to serve the client and make sure they're accurate, and have to tell the story
Yeah.
properly.
And like, for example, for us, we are working on a feature for Beauty Box, which, I mean, people have been requesting for years, which is like, you guys can laugh if you want, but it's a true thing. It's like teeth whitening. We had like for years people asking for that. And, you know, yeah, we're training the AI, but, you know, it can identify it. But then when you have it on a video and you're moving, it's like, how does it hold the mask? How does it render after you apply everything? So it's not just, yeah, the AI can identify it and do some of the work, but how can we actually make it useful? So that I was happy to hear that. I was also happy to hear from the women perspective, because I am really involved with the women's groups, with GALSNGEAR, with, you know, whoever wants to talk about it. I think it's super important. For me, I was talking to Nikki-san about this. I think we used to have a bunch of when we talked about gender diversity, and we talked about, you know, companies are hiring more women to meet some quota at their companies because it's a thing now. They're doing this, they're doing that. I heard a lot of women not wanting to take those opportunities because they felt like they were being hired for the quota, or to, you know, because they were women. And I was always really vocal about this. I'm like, take it, you know, men will not like just not take the opportunity because they're being hired just because they're men. So I think a few people that didn't agree with me before are kind of like, you know, I'm just taking the opportunities. And I was really happy to see
I love that.
because then it's what you
That's
do with
great.
it after,
Great.
you know, I'll take it.
Right.
You know,
Well, and I will say,
I have to endure that for the bad. Why am I not gonna take advantage of
Right,
it? So
right. Why
on the
not?
women's side, I saw that shift on the panels that I went to, and on the booth conversations I had. So
Yeah.
that was good, I think.
Well, and I'm seeing a lot more women CEOs too of startups in our space. So that's good. I'm curious, if I could jump over to somebody else, maybe Noemi. Did you have any takeaways from IBC you want to share? Can we unmute you? Is that okay? Oh, she's getting up. Where are you going? She's going somewhere.
So she's
quiet.
switching the room.
Okay.
Switching room.
Joe, what about you while she's moving rooms?
I'm glad you called on Joe, because we'd be so remiss if we didn't talk about 2110 as a technology.
Exactly. Joe, can you fill us
Yes.
in?
Yeah, I think the amount of 2110, it was just a short time ago. I remember, you know, talking to people about the new standard and the production based on the new standard. And it was such a foreign subject. And today it's really the central topic and subject. There's a lot of other AV application type standards with NDI. IPMX was a big topic, which is really, I like to refer to IPMX as 2110 Lite, because it's based on the 2110 standard.
Can I just, for the couple people, Joe, who probably everybody knows, but 2110 being the SMPTE group or suite of standards for transporting media over IP networks. So all the video, the data.
Right.
So just to share that with the group. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. To Cindy's point, 2110 is based on a suite of protocols. So ST2110 is the main overarching name for the standard. And then there's a host of protocols for timing and for audio and for metadata and on and on and on. And they all serve their own purpose. So the amount of vendors this year, it's been growing year over year, but the amount of vendors that were supporting the standard and talking about it was tremendous. So
great.
it's validating for me because I named my company 2110 Solutions
So it
4
would
years
really
ago.
suck if it wasn't
So I
validated.
was ahead of the curve. And what else? I think that bringing how different manufacturers, if I could use Bridge Technologies as just an example, because it was apparent in their booth and apparent in many other manufacturers' booths, how integration of third parties is becoming really the wave of the future.
Sure.
I mean, in the Bridge booth, we had Pixatope, which is a company that does augmented reality and extended reality and mixed reality type of virtual environments. And that product was incorporated into the solutions at the Bridge stand. Chromorama is a third-party company that provides standardized as well as customized LUTs being
Yep.
settings for shading, camera shading. And so in the past, let's say at any venue, you'd literally have to run around with a USB stick from camera to camera to get the colors that they wanted the cameras to match. And there's a number of standards for these colors, or they could do their own customized colors to be implemented. And now all of that can be implemented directly across and instantaneously over the network. And that was incorporated into some of the Bridge technology solutions. So things like that make production so much more intuitive and easy, and you know, it only becomes like when you think about it, you go, oh wow, this was done the old way with sticks and rocks, and now, you know, we're doing it with a click of a mouse, and it's being incorporated across the whole network. So things like that, things are getting definitely more intelligent, you know, with each passing year.
Right. And I think this is why we're so focused on upskilling GALSNGEAR. I think that at the talent program, they were very focused on, you know, let's reach out to universities and make sure all these students are studying all these broadcast tools. But really for us, it's like people are already in the workplace. They're already in the workflow. They're already engineers who've been doing this, but they just need to be upskilled in these new areas. You know, I mean, it's not just newcomers to the industry. It's really those of us who've been around since the sticks and rocks stage, as
You know,
mentioned.
And to your point, so when we were talking about marketing, a great way to do marketing is to be that service, to be that authority, to be that guide. Hey, let me guide you on how ST2110 can be used, how you can use in your facility, what pitfalls to avoid. And so what you're saying is like a great marketing opportunity in a nice, authentic way where you're genuinely helping somebody.
Right. Now, some of the downside, or well, the upside for the end user and the systems integrators is that because of the intelligence that's going into these systems now, one example is there was an NEP truck outside of IBC. And I went on the NEP truck, who is a client customer of ours, and I was amazed at the scale of, this was a brand new truck, by the way, the scale of the truck and the implementation, but the amount of equipment on the truck is becoming less and less, and the size and footprint of the equipment is becoming less and less with each passing year.
Right.
So you go in there and you look at the racks in the rack room and you go, wow. And this was a 35 camera truck. This was a truck that was capable of doing live production for up to 35 cameras.
Right.
Also,
And
all
this
IP truck.
all IP, all
Right,
IP
because
truck.
there's so much software-based solutions
And
now.
when you see what, you know, saying
Right.
that's running this whole truck,
Right.
it was kind of amazing.
Right. So before we go, I'm wondering if Danilda could share a little video that she made of our students that we shared who couldn't come to the panel because they invited us so late, but who were involved in a beta testing project with us. Could we let her share her screen and audio, and make sure you click all the right things, Danilda, for audio sharing? It's very short.
Most people, when they hear the word student attached to a title, they assume we aren't skilled enough and we kind of need to be handheld through everything. But organizations like GALSNGEAR are so important for us because they take our training wheels off and they just let us lead the way. The way that GALSNGEAR allowed us to experiment with things, it was something unheard of for students. Because I was working as the technical director for those live shows, my GALSNGEAR mentor talked me through the shows, and she was really there to support me. I actually got to work with technology that I have such early access to as a 21-year-old, and it's so exciting because I feel like I'm making a difference. I was working one-on-one with the product manager of Chiron Live, and she was so receptive to my ideas and feedback, and it really felt more like a collaborative effort. I'm so happy that I got to be a part of that. The mentors are there to help you, to fall back on. They provided us with so much needed support in order to build us up and create confidence so that when we are offered a job in the industry, we're prepared and ready to take it. GALSNGEAR treated us as peers in the industry, and they helped us create connections and overall just kind of eased our transition from students to professionals. Having organizations like GALSNGEAR that uplift women in the industry is so important. Having representation, no matter the job you're pursuing, is crucial. And working with those women one-on-one who've paved the way is an absolute honor.
So that was very exciting for them. And we're definitely going to do more beta testing because that's one area where we see women are being left out, where we think we can contribute to make the industry a better, more equitable place. I wanted to remind you before we wrap up that we have an in-person meeting in New York. So if you're coming to NAB New York, please come to our soiree. We're having a rooftop soiree at Motion Picture Enterprises on the Wednesday night of NAB Show New York. And I just checked this morning, there's still a few spaces available. So come, bring a +1, put the word out to colleagues. We love to have more the merrier. And we would love to have you all there. So thank you for joining us on the Tequity Hub. Cindy, it's been a joy and pleasure to work with you this morning. Sarah, thank you for joining us from Berlin. Thank you all who've been participating, and those of you who'll be watching remotely. This will be posted to our YouTube channel, and it'll be also repeated on NAB Amplify, where we also have a channel. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.